following presentation is a Delmarva Studios production.
Welcome back, truth seekers from around the world. It's time for another edition of the Flat Earth Files. It's episode 33, and we have a great episode lined up for you today. A great guest, Rich from Virginia Beach, will be joining us momentarily. Before we welcome him to the program, just a reminder, questions, comments, concerns, we're catching up on the emails. Please do email us at theflatearthfiles@gmail.com. Again, it is theflatearthfiles@gmail.com. Secondly, don't forget our website. The forum has been hopping. I saw somebody just post something within the hour. The chat room's been real busy, like-minded people able to join together and share ideas, which is great. You can't have enough of these resources available for like-minded people to get together and have a great conversation. So there you go. That's all I wanted to get out of the way today. We have a special guest today, so without any further ado, we'd like to welcome Rich from Virginia Beach. Good evening, sir. How are you today?
I'm very good, George. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'm a big fan of the show, by the way, and you also have some of the best bumper music in all of podcast.
Well, I appreciate that, and some of it we do here internally, but most of it we get externally from our friends at Epidemic Sounds, who we've been customers of theirs for 5 years, and they put out some of the best original copyright. We get to copyright the music and use it for our podcast, and there's not a lot of people out there who would allow us to use their type of music in these type of podcasts. If you're in the truth community, you're a target, right?
Oh, absolutely. You're right.
So our thanks to them. I can't thank them enough for 5 years of just great bumpers, stingers, and the music they provide. So again, thanks for that as well. So Rich, again, thank you for joining us tonight. Why don't you give the folks a little introduction about yourself, and then we can start talking about your journey to the truth, sir.
All right. Well, as my handle indicates, I do live in Virginia Beach, Virginia. I've been here for about 35 years, thanks to the United States Navy. Took me out of Ohio and transplanted me here, and I retired in 2006 from the Navy and retired full-time in 2020. And I've been, into the flat earth and all that stuff since about 2017, so about 6 years now. And I'm just living a dream.
There you go. So one thing I'd like to ask you before we move on to the truth movement and the flat earth itself. So were you in the military from like 86 to 2006?
It was actually 82. I did 24 years.
Okay, I did 24 years as well. Isn't it amazing, at least from my eyes, how the vast difference in the military from the time you joined from when the time you retired?
Oh, yeah. Well, I actually got to enjoy a little bit more of it. For the last 14 years, I was a DOD contractor.
Really?
And for a lot of that time, not all, but most of that 14 years, I worked right where I retired from.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, so
you're doing the same thing. You just got to lose the uniform and make a little more money.
Yeah, well, it also gave me an opportunity to see some of the newer clientele coming in the Navy. And, yeah, it has changed dramatically.
Yeah, and I have been, I don't want to turn this into like a military conversation, but this I think is very important to say. A lot of people don't really understand what it means to be in combat in the military, and you set up soldiers, sailors, Marines for failure if you don't give them an extremely tough training environment. And I've always said if someone in the military encounters a great deal of pressure, right? In combat, if that's the first time they really encounter that level of stress, you've set that individual up for extreme failure.
Oh, I agree 100%. In full disclosure, I have been in conflicts, but I have not been in official combat. So I just want to throw that out there. And I appreciate what you've been through. I've listened to every single one of your podcasts, and you've disclosed a little bit of it along the way. And my hats are off to you, brother.
Well, thanks. It's I don't. That's part of the reason what I'm doing, what I do today, because I kind of wanted to be the last generation in my family to go fight a banker's war. God, I feel, took me through this journey for certain reasons and had me experience these events for a reason. And in retrospect, I see how the world really works. From, I think, changing my job to seeing how the contracting, I don't know if you as a DoD civilian had a chance to see how some of the contracts worked within the government, but it is very, very eye-opening to say the least.
I've got 14 years of firsthand experience reading and following those contracts. And everybody wants to, throw a big complaint up about, DOD or civilian contractors that do these military contracts. They're expensive because that's the way the government writes the contract.
Indeed. Exactly.
It is not because the labor is that expensive.
Nope.
It's all of the wickets you have to jump through to just turn one single bolt. So This is not something that the contractors are taking advantage of the American people. It's the government or the military, whoever writes these contracts, are just way and above, over the top, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a coincidence. I mean, you look at the Secretary of the Army, the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin. I don't think it's a coincidence that guy sat on the board with Raytheon.
Oh, yeah, where's his loyalty, right?
Exactly. And I'm sure when he steps down, he'll go right back and get a very nice bonus. It's sad but that's how the real world works, for sure. So again, thank you for your service, and it's great to hear some insight. I had when I was deployed to the Balkans back in 2000, I worked directly with some DoD contractors, and they were some of the greatest guys I had a chance to hang out with. That was a very good experience for me as well. I could say that those two guys who I worked with directly taught me more about how contracting works. And it really set me up for success when, 3 years later, I was in Iraq, and I was a foo who was carrying around $25,000 cash and understood the importance of keeping receipts and being honest about that, and then being a contract officer and a contract officer representative and understanding how the whole process works. I saw a lot of people get locked up and lose their military careers because of greed. So I'm very thankful for the interactions I had with those guys.
Yeah, it's funny how everything kind of sets you up for the next adventure, right?
Isn't it? It is amazing. I don't think it's an accident either. So,
no, it's
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
deliberate.
cut you off. Go ahead.
I agree. It is deliberate.
Yep, 100%. Why don't you, I'd love, before we get into the flat Earth itself, if you would talk a little bit about your journey to the truth. When did you start to realize that how they say our world is portrayed and how it actually is run differs?
Okay, well, the best way I can put this is I want all the listeners to just put flat Earth out of your mind for a second. That right now is not important. Just think about this, okay? You haven't been taught anything about where you live in school. You haven't seen it on the news. You haven't watched movies. So you're coming into this with a blank slate. And what we're taught is that the Earth spins at the equator at 24,901.55. That's the diameter of the equator. So it spins at actually 1,037 miles an hour at the equator. So then the Earth's average distance, and this is what they're telling us. The Earth's average distance from the sun is 92.8. So let's say 93 million miles. How they get that is amazing to me, but they got it. And the Earth travels around the sun at an amazing speed of 66,600 miles an hour. Probably has nothing to do with those 3 6s there, but we'll go on. According to NASA, the sun travels around the Milky Way, or with the Milky Way spiral, at 515,000 miles an hour. And it just happens to take 230 million years to make one revolution around the galaxy. How they figured that out, I guess it's just simple math. The Milky Way galaxy is traveling at a linear speed of 1,409,395 miles an hour. And that's measured by what? Cosmic microwave background. So, acceleration is identified as any time you change direction. So basically, we're accelerating in like 5 different directions all at one time while traveling in a linear straight line, or approximately straight line, with the Milky Way at 1.4 million miles an hour. But yet, you walk outside, say you live by a lake, or you live by the ocean shore, or you live by any body of water, on a perfectly calm morning. You sip a cup of coffee by the bank, and there is not a ripple. And if you don't have any wind that day, the water will be like a mirror. Well, you tell me how that is going to happen with all of these rotations, spinnings, traveling, and all this simultaneously happen at the same time. That is impossible. It's not going to happen.
That's right.
And so if you just take that little bit and sink that in, basically what they're telling us is not the way it is. So, is it flat? Is it convex? Is it hollow? I tend to go and think that it's more flat because we can see too far.
Right.
With obvious, we have,
you're going to have hills and valleys, etc. Sure.
Hills and valleys, exactly. But, a body of water does not lie. And it lays perfectly flat. It doesn't curve around a ball. It never will. You will never see that anywhere. They use water in levels to figure out, how level something is for a reason. So just that one little simple fact right there should get anybody to at least question this. And some of the absurd things that we're told is, if you use common sense and observe your environment, and I don't know if any of your listeners, if you've ever been in a earthquake. Just the slightest little tremor, and it just like throws your whole equilibrium off kilter. It can send out massive tidal waves. That's just a small, slight little movement, not swirling and spinning and traveling in all these unreal speeds and everything. The oceans would be just awash over all of the continents. There would not probably be any dry land on the earth if that was the case. So that, to me, if anybody thinks about that logically, how can you come to any other conclusion but that we're being lied to?
You made a ton of great opening points, and I'd like to touch on a few. I don't even know where to start. I think something I preach on both podcasts is numerology, and I don't think they choose some of these numbers randomly. Obviously, they say we're on a axis of 23.4 degrees, which if you subtract from a right angle is 66.6. But when you were talking about that 93 million miles, that 93 is a very significant number. 93, April 3rd, the date April 3rd is the 93rd day of the year. And that is the day supposedly Jesus died on the cross. So a lot of these things are mockery, like the Freemasons. One of the reasons they use that number 33, because he was 33 when he died. The other thing you mentioned, the cosmic microwave background, the CMB, it is the cooled remnant of the first light that, and this is according to the scientisms, the cooled remnant of the first light that could ever travel freely throughout the universe. This fossil radiation the furthest that any telescope can see, was released soon after the Big Bang. So, for the people who buy into this, you have to realize that this, again, is a tip of the cap to the Big Bang and scientism, and again, is the complete opposite of what the Bible tells you. And one other thing I do want to add before I forget, because this is Rich's show. I don't want to take away too much from it, but one of the questions I get quite often is, if the Earth is relatively flat, why if I live in Philadelphia, why can't I see Chicago with a telescope? What you have to understand is the density of the atmosphere at ground level. The higher you get, the less dense the atmosphere comes. That's why you can see the sky, most clearly on most days. But you're never, because of the density of the air, you're never going to be able to. There's only a certain distance that you'll ever be able to see. Go ahead, Rich.
Right. I agree. I mean, you have dust close to the ground.
Yep.
You may not think so, but I mean, a little bit of, like right now, a little wind blows down your road, it swirls all this pollen. Well, all this stuff is relatively close to the ground level, so to speak. And then you've got the very thickest atmosphere on the ground level. And like you said, the higher up you go, the clearer things become, the less there is to block it. So, if you go up in a balloon, yeah, you'll be able to see it because you're not looking through all of this atmospheric density and dirt and water vapor and all that other stuff. Precisely.
I think I've mentioned a few times on this podcast, in Colorado in Manitou Springs, it's called the Manitou Mile, and it's called the Stairway to Heaven. It's just an incline a mile high, and when you get to the top, you turn around. I mean, you can see forever. I guess on some days you can actually see Kansas, they say, but it's again, the higher you get, the more visible things become, just like Rich said.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever been exposed to any of this guy. Don't quote me on this, but I think his name is his YouTube channel is TJ Nolan, and he actually does some brilliant infrared photography, which cuts through a lot of this ground layer clutter. I mean, it just sees right through it. It's pretty amazing technology. I think he converted a P900 or a P1000, and it's now an IR camera. And if you are interested in being able to see things which are impossibly far to see on a ball, look at TJ Nolan's channel on YouTube. And I hope I got the right initials there, but his last name is Nolan, and really fabulous photography.
That's awesome. I'm going to have to look into that. Let me write that down. TJ Nolan. You said, kind of shifting gears here just a little bit, you said it was about 2016 when you came into the Flat Earth?
About 2017, so it's been about 6 years.
Okay. What was it that allowed you, well, first let me ask you this. Have you explored the truth community prior to that? Had you looked into things like 9/11, Waco, and Oklahoma City and these type of things?
Yes. Yes, actually I have. I think probably one of the first things that really caught my attention that, we're kind of being deceived here was when I looked into the Oklahoma City bombing. Now, this was before I even thought anything about Flat Earth. Mm-hmm. I didn't really notice or think about, I didn't put the facts together in my head about 9/11 and all that. I think Oklahoma City, the Murr building, was just some things just didn't quite add up, and I actually took the time to look into it a little bit, and that's kind of what started me on that. Hey, things are a little fishy out there. Need to pay attention.
Yeah, that one's got a place in my heart because what they did to that police officer, Terrence Yakey. They murdered him in cold blood. The FBI, probably with the highest people with the chief of police, because he was one of the first ones on the scene, and he knew the story as it was portrayed on the television and the news in the following days and weeks was a complete lie, and they killed him for it. And it also really infuriates me to see that people who colluded to cover up the truth, and I'm speaking directly to Merrick Garland, is now our attorney, the DOJ's attorney general. These type of things just make me sick to my stomach, how these people cross the American citizens and get rewarded for it.
Yeah, how that is allowed to happen is absolutely beyond me. And we may get into a little bit of law stuff if permitted, but I think to me that is the only way that we can take our freedom back is learn how to protect it. And the only way to protect it is to learn how the court systems are supposed to work, learn the rules of the court, and you can actually win. And that is the only way we're going to get this back the way it should be.
Yeah, we'll definitely get to that. Certainly, I would love to hear that, and I'm sure the listeners would as well. Let's continue the journey. I know for me, it was a big deal to let down my guard to even consider flat Earth, and I went in to, hey, I'm just going to debunk this and move on with my, my these other things that are important in the world of truth, right? 9/11, Oklahoma City, like we have just discussed. What was it that allowed you to let down your guard and actually take a look into it and to consider it, knowing the way that they manipulate people through Hollywood, through television, that we're on a ball, right? Well,
yeah, it was actually, I started watching some YouTube videos, and I think one of the first ones was probably Dave Murphy. He's an English gentleman who had spent some time over here in the U.S., and he actually worked in the financial banking industry, I think in New York, and he lived, I think, in New Jersey. And he was living there when the trade towers came down. But he had some very interesting videos about the subject of the Earth being flat. And the guy is just such an awesome speaker. He kind of just drew me in with the way he talks. Yes. And I was listening to what he said, and it was very compelling. I think he was doing some kind of show. He was already back in England at this time, and somebody was interviewing, and he was just going on and on and on, and then talking about what you covered last week in your episode 32 was Space Shuttle.
The Columbia? Challenger. The Challenger that blew up.
Yep. And he was talking about those people, which you covered a little bit about that last week. Mm-hmm. And I was amazed, and I started digging into this stuff. I'm like, this can't be. I remember when the Challenger blew up. I was actually out at sea on the USS Enterprise getting a live feed when I watched that happen live, and I just couldn't. It didn't make sense, but I was too busy to think about it. And I started looking into it, and sure enough, everything that man said, I was taking notes, I looked them up, and sure enough, there was validity to everything he was saying. It's amazing. So, once you start, one dot is no big deal. 2 dots is really no big deal, but you get 3, now you got a triangle. You can make things with that.
And I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say about a day or two into, kind of like you, there's a dot, that makes sense. There's a dot, that makes sense. And then it went back to, well, I've known, or I should say, I've believed that we never went to the moon for decades. I never bought that story. That story went down the same road as Santa Claus when I was 10 years old. None of it made any sense to me. And that took a whole new meaning for me, understanding that this was all part of a grander deception.
So actually, you never buying into the moon landing was kind of validation when you actually heard that none of this is even possible.
Right.
That's powerful. See, now I was in an opposite mindset. I believed all that. I didn't have any reason not to, mainly because I never looked into it. But once I did, things really, really started to change, and for the better. Let me say this to all your listeners, too. It has completely changed my entire life once I realized how special I am, and that some rock isn't going to fall from space and wipe us all out in a nanosecond. It's just not going to happen. We're protected here. We were put here. This place was put here for us to rule dominion over and to take care of it as well. And I think that's what we're supposed to be doing. And we shouldn't be worrying about these things that do not concern us. They're not important.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember, this is kind of out of left field, but when you were saying that, I remembered it's probably 15 or 20 years ago when my son was younger. We were living in Colorado Springs at the time. He was watching a movie called Deep Impact with Morgan Freeman, and he couldn't sleep that night. He was so stressed out. And now we joke about it today because he's kind of awake like myself. We think about the things like Deep Impact and that 90s movie with the Aerosmith guy's daughter in it, and Bruce Willis. All these things, we believe they're just blockbuster movies where we go to entertain ourselves. But not only are you paying to be entertained, you're paying to be brainwashed.
Oh, absolutely. And I kind of caught on to that fact quite a while ago. I hear you making movie references and pulling one-liners from movies. And to me, I think that's awesome recall. I have not watched a primetime go to the movie since 2014. The last one I watched was American Sniper, and I have not went and seen another one. I might have been with people, and we might have pulled something up on Netflix or Hulu,
sure.
But I just don't watch that anymore. I see right through all of it, and it's just not even entertaining anymore.
Oh, no, it's not. It's horrible. And I've said many times, me and my wife had gone back and started watching TV from the 50s and 60s. And even then we've started to notice things like, what's the new one we've been researching? It's called like Dobie Gillis. The guy from Gilligan was in it. The very first episode, 10 minutes in, they pull a number for a raffle, and the number was 322, the Skull and Bones number. And this is from like 1957. So we look at each other and, man, this stuff has been going on. Basically everything from 1945 on has all been a big gain with these people, in my opinion.
Well, that's exactly right. Right after World War II is when everything just really started getting crazy. Really, about 1947 is when it really ramped up. And, you got the JPL, and you got, all these three-letter agencies were formed, and the government just exploded. They started doing all this unlawful taxation, well, really tricking people into thinking they owed taxes.
Right.
And it's still going on today. And look how big the government got because of it.
Absolutely. Obviously the Federal Reserve was the first big disaster, and then leaving the gold standard with Nixon's administration, taxes, they've just burdened the American people to where they never get, 99% of the people never really get a chance to get ahead and live fairly comfortable. It was maybe for 10 or 15 years after World War II where it was still viable for a single, for one of the person, the father to work, the mother could stay home, and they would still live comfortably. That is long by the wayside with just the way people are nickel and dimed. You pay sales tax, you pay taxes on vehicles, you pay property tax. I mean, it never ends. And it would be a little easier to swallow if they actually lived by the documents that, the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights, if it was actually a clean deal between the American quote-unquote citizens and the government. But it's a one-sided contract that only benefits them. So, people, let me just say this. In 1775 or whenever it was, they broke out their muskets over a lot less than what we're dealing with today.
Yeah, I mean, that started... that the tipping point for that was not only all the tyranny that King George III was doing to the colonists, but the final tipping point, believe it or not, was them taxing tea.
Yep.
And there comes the Boston Tea Party, and then that was just set the whole ball of wax in motion. And then, we got tired of it. We were actually treasonous to the British Crown. So
that's right.
Americans are treasonous to the British Crown. Well, look where that got us. That got us some freedom for a while. And then the Bar Association crept in, and now they've been trying to take it back ever since.
Yeah, that's for sure. It didn't last very long. And, if you believe the story, our founding fathers did see far enough ahead to include these things in the Bill of Rights. Unfortunately, they've destroyed the first, they've destroyed the second. The Patriot Act pretty much did the second, fourth, sixth, and eighth, on and on and on. It's just, and we should definitely talk more about that in just a little bit. But let's talk a little bit more about the flat Earth. Have you had a chance to? Let me ask you a couple questions. Number one, I get this email a lot from people. Are you down with the term flat Earth, or do you think that's been hijacked and we should use a different term?
I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I don't personally like labels. They asked Jesus, "What shall I call you?" And he didn't give them an answer, because how can you put a label on the Creator? Or no, it wasn't Jesus. It was God, actually.
Right.
I think Moses asked, "Well, what should we call you?" And he says, "Call me, I am has sent me to you," or something like that. But so he doesn't like labels, and I don't particularly care for them either. I'm not a zealot religious person, but I'm definitely in contact with the Creator, and I'm okay with that.
That's good. And I get a lot of people tell me they found my podcast because they actually put the words flat Earth in the search engine. So that's something I don't really want to tinker with, especially since the podcast has become so popular. But I understand people. There are a lot of people, even within the truth community, to where the word flat Earth is still very much a stigma. And that's one of the reasons why I branched out and did a separate podcast. Does that surprise you that in the truth community in large, that probably 90% plus still won't go near flat Earth because of what it brings?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what it brings is a lot of soul searching, and a lot of people are not capable of digging that deep into their soul and realizing, they got to dig through the cognitive dissonance that they've been duped since the first mobile hung over their head in their crib.
Yeah.
And everything has attempted to re-quantify that all the way up until they start looking into it. And I tried talking to my mother about this several years ago, and her cognitive dissonance, and she passed away a couple years ago, but she was a very logical person, and I started to get to her, and she finally looked at me. She said, "Rich," she said, "I'm 78 years old. I'm happy in my life, and I'm not going to look into this." And I looked at her and I said, "Mom, I completely understand. We don't have to talk about this ever again if you don't want." And that to me said a lot. She admitted she doesn't want to look into it. And a lot of other people are like that. They just are not big enough to admit it.
Yeah. And, I'm of the belief, I don't think you're ever too old to search for the truth. And the other thing I understand is, I guess the older you get, that's more programming that you have to reverse, right? That's more, right, that you've been listening to a certain narrative all your life. And as I talked to the gentleman I interviewed, Rashad, last week, a young guy, I'm very, very thrilled. Between my emails and the people we've spoken to, the younger generation, there are a lot of people out there, like you said, with cognitive dissonance that are picking up on, hey, this doesn't pass the sniff test. I'm going to look further into that. And this is one of my biggest pet peeves that I cover on my other podcast, which is we really need to get the federal government out of the Department of Education. If you look at the 10th plank of the Communist Manifesto, it is, we're going to hijack your children's education and dumb them down. And my goodness, they've tried. They sure have. They've dumbed down the curriculum, that's for sure. They've taken away a lot of the important things, like physically writing out reports instead of iPads, true, false, multiple choice. And it's more, to me, and I've seen education. I was in college later in my years. They really don't encourage critical thinking. It's more, memorize this and make sure you answer it correctly on the test. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I like the way you put that. Let me say, first of all, going back to what you originally said, was when you had Rashad on last week, that was an excellent interview. That guy, and for his age, being no older than he was, that man was on point. He knew what was going on, and I applaud people like that are willing to just look at things with an open mind and come to your own logical conclusion. I mean, that's so much. We're not taught that, and it goes back to your point about the education system. These kids are taught to memorize and regurgitate, rinse and repeat. That's all they know. They're going to come out of there, just like George Carlin said, smart enough to be good little workers and fix your little machines and do your little menial tasks for you, because the elites aren't going to do it. They're in the club and we're not.
That's right. There's a big club at the top and you ain't in it, right?
That's right.
So let me ask you this, and I hate to keep going back and forth, but that's kind of how my mind works. I apologize. Back post-World War II, the controllers, the powers that be, do you think, now obviously the heliocentric model itself was supposedly, 500 years ago from Copernicus, but there are many people documented in the early 1900s as saying, yeah, we always knew the Earth was flat. So it does seem that history was kind of hijacked there post-World War II when they started really pushing the ball in heliocentrism. Do you think it was, hey, we're going to eventually fake a moon landing? Was it all deception of God? Was it a power grab creating, knowing they would create NASA and be able to get these huge contracts, which, like I stated the other day, they are part of the military industrial complex. The people who make the big warships and planes are the same people who, create the things for NASA. Yeah.
I would say just back up, blindfold yourself, and throw a dart. Because it could be any one of those reasons or all of those reasons, in my opinion. They put the Antarctic Treaty in there. You can't go there. There's some interesting stuff about facts actually in the United States Code, Chapter 44B, about the Antarctic Mineral Resources Protection that they've got in the United States Code. They do not want us going there, and they'll use any excuse they can to keep us out of there, and they are there. It's effective. People do not want us to be centered. They do not want us to know there's a creator. They want to get us worshiping all these idols and money and movie stars and, all these false things, and it just takes us further and further away from our center where we need to be, and realize we are the most important beings here. And we need to enforce those rights, or they're just going to reach in and try to take them.
You are spot on with that, 100%. My theory is, here's my theory. I'm going to shoot it at you. I think that the Germans knew back in the 30s, even as early as, the 40s, the secrets of Antarctica. I think that they knew there was a firmament. They had New Swabia down there. Then, of course, 1945, Germany surrenders. We start harvesting all their scientists, all their, top of the food chain guys. Richard Byrd goes down, Operation High Jump, and they said, see, we told you, there's no escape. There's the firmament. And I think that's when they said, well, if the people find out and, the Bible, they're going to know the Bible's true. We can't have that. And I think that's kind of their line of thinking. And then, of course, they said we could also build rockets and we could get away with these huge contracts. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I can sum it up pretty simply. I mean, what's on Wernher von Braun's tombstone?
That's Psalms 19:1, right?
Yes, sir. I mean, you look at Operation Paperclip. You look at all NASA. It started out NACA, and then it turned into NASA, and then here comes Wernher von Braun, who was a high-level guy in the Nazi Party in Germany, and we brought him and a whole bunch of his cohorts over here, and they started NASA basically, and it's just been like this ever since. And now how many millions of dollars a day, 60, 70 we're giving them?
Yep.
I mean, I think that's nothing more than, it's just like the taxation thing where they just keep their thumb on our spinal cord, pressing us down so we can't do anything. And then they, launder all that through NASA. I mean, has any of your listeners ever actually looked, and there is a very good high definition, high resolution picture of the lunar lander while it is sitting on the moon, supposedly. And you can see that there's like curtain rods and duct tape and these astronauts lived in there, and it's supposed to hold in, 14.7 psi compared to a vacuum. There is absolutely no way any of what they said is even remotely possible. But yet, our Federal Reserve fake money system is pumping in the credit of the American people to this agency. And I think it's all, a bunch of black ops, and it's all just to keep us so we can't prosper and figure this stuff out ourselves. Otherwise, they would lose every bit of the power that they have.
I'm looking at that picture now. I just happened to pull it up while you were talking. It's so ludicrous. Number one, there's no blast crater. Number two, that stuff looks like gold aluminum foil around the legs. No blast crater. The lighting, I mean, the shadows from the lunar lander is so obvious that it's a stage light. I've been on studios and I know exactly, just like Bart Sibrel said, right? He's a documentary guy, and that's the reason when he first looked at the photos, he's like, "Wait a second, I've done." He worked for ABC. Bart Sibrel was a big dude, and he'd worked in big studios before. And as soon as he saw that, he's like, "Wait a second, that's exactly what it looks like inside of the studio." And like you said, when you take the time to actually look close at these pictures, it's absolutely ridiculous to think that this thing went 240,000 miles, and the lunar lander, all this stuff was fitted on it, and all with the technology of basically an Atari 2600. It's absolutely ludicrous.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You kind of touched on this with Rashad last week about, I think about this today. I'm like, how did I not realize this 40 years ago? But when they did that shot of the lunar lander launching off of the moon, supposedly, and the camera tilted and panned up, come on. And you can just tell that was, and it's still there. You can still find it on the NASA website. Yep. They're laughing at us.
Absolutely. That, the federal government has become a monster that is just unbreakable. Look, if they can take out a sitting president, they don't care. They keep us so busy with sports and movies and Netflix, and they've made us just comfortable enough to where we won't get off our behinds and go, take our freedoms back, right?
Well, I kind of have to disagree with you on that.
Good.
And the reason I'm going to say that is I've been in touch and continue and hope I'm in touch with even more people that are actually taking back their rights, and we are paving a way for others to follow in our tracks if they so choose, and we are winning. It's really happening. People, I think you touched on this with a couple of your other episodes where I think the whole, mask, injection, all that stuff that happened in March of 2020, people kind of fell for it at first. Some did. I never did. I seen through it from day one. But and I'm sure a lot of your listeners did too, but a lot of people we have all seen, I still see people wearing their mask, and it's no longer mandated around where I live. But there's still people wearing them. There's Kool-Aid drinking sheeple out there, and they're everywhere. But there are also trailblazers out there that see this and realize this is an opportunity. They pulled one a little bit too far, and this is it. This is my hill to die on. And I'm taking everything back that's owed me, and so far I've been successful.
That's awesome. One of my listeners reached out to me, and this is something I talked about doing, I think, in the fall of last year, and I thought, man, thanks for reminding me. There's certain ways you can try to spread the message, and this gentleman showed me his. He orders these business cards, 500 at a time, and says, it's got websites, it's Research Event 201, websites for Flat Earth, different things to kind of get people to look at. And even if only 1 out of 10 people actually take the time to search the website, if you can turn just one person a week, that one person, there's a very good chance he's going to be very excited. Like, I don't know if you remember, but when I finally accepted, I said, yes, the earth is flat, I had a renewed energy about me, and I was very excited to share it with other people. I shared it with my wife. She was very quick to agree, and we both dove in, and it kind of spread to even certain other family members. But that's just like the old chewing gum commercial. That person told another 2 people. Those 2 people told another 2 people. So, while the numbers may seem small, that fire could spread at any time.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I've went through the same thing myself, and you're right. I had this exuberance that just came from within. It was like just my inner power starting to shine. And, other people were questioning me about it, and I was talking to them. And unfortunately, I didn't run into a whole lot of people that were very... It seems like most of the people that I've spoke to, and your listeners may know this as well, but it seems like the people you talk to that are the most highest educated / indoctrinated are the least likely to be open-minded to any of this.
Yeah, they're the hardest one to get through, and I can vouch for that.
That is a very tough nut to crack, and I've tried to crack a few of them. I've been successful at some and ridiculed by others, but you know what? That's okay. I throw it out there. They can look the other way if they want, and I don't force it on anybody. If somebody asks me a question, I'll engage them, and I'll be polite, and I'll just throw some, like you said, breadcrumbs. And I like the breadcrumb method because it's up to them to pick up those crumbs. And if they choose to do that, that's on them.
Yeah, the other thing I found is the more forceful you try to be about it, the more defensive they'll be and back away.
Oh, yeah. As soon as I see any pushback at all, I stop immediately.
Yep, that's the way to go.
I'm like, this is not an argument that we should be having. It's not an argument at all. I'm throwing some stuff out there, and then I don't play the old elitist card like, I know more than you do type thing either, because I try not to be condescending. Well, I'm not a condescending person. I'm just here to help, and if anybody wants any help, I'll be glad to help them. And that's how I am. That's how I've always been, and I'm just getting better.
And I'm glad you mentioned that. You had mentioned some Telegram channels that you wanted to recommend for the listeners, right?
Yes, actually, a member of actually quite a few, probably more than I should be, but a lot of the stuff I'm into basically on Telegram is mainly a lot of legal ideas. There's one if you're a Virginia person like I am, it's called How to Win, Virginia Chat. It's all about legal ideas for the Commonwealth of Virginia. If you're having any problems, everything from child support to property taxes to income taxes to, somebody, infringing on your rights in any way. And we cover the gamut on that. Another real good one is it's called the Big Sib Law Informational, and Big Sib, which is Brandon Sibley.
Oh, yeah.
Really, really very intelligent guy. And I follow his. He's also got one called the Big Sib Chat. There's one I was telling you about, Dave Murphy. He's got one. It's called Ask Allegedly Dave, if you want to search that. there's a lot of flat Earth related stuff in there. Alphonse Fagiolo is another one that I follow. He's big on the legal ideas.
Yep.
He's I love watching some of his interviews. This guy is like a typical South Philly guy. He's like no nonsense.
Yep.
He's like he wants to grab you by the hair and say, "Look at me, I did this to you," kind of guy.
Yep.
And he's had success and he's about to have more. So
good.
It's yeah. So that's some of the stuff I'm into. Besides, and I'll tell you, George, this whole flat Earth thing. It is not just a belief. It is actually a way of life.
Indeed.
And it absolutely changed my life. It changed my center from being way out in left field to being exactly in the center where it needs to be. And that right there gave me more power. And then I realized, I'm a force to be reckoned with. I'm not just, I'm going to take it to you. You do something wrong to me, you're not going to like the repercussions. And that can happen very easily with no violence. It all happens in the courtroom. It's all perfectly, lawful to do this stuff. And to me, that right now, let me go back to the flat Earth.
Yeah, sure.
I really, was into spreading the word on this and that. And, I attended, like you and I discussed off air, I went to 3 different flat Earth events. All 3 of them happened to have been in South Carolina in 2000. I think 2020 was the first one, 2021, and then 2022, I think, was the third one. I could be off by a year, but that's about what I remember. And by the third time I went, I mean, these people are great. Let me give you an idea about going to one of these. And I think FlatEarthFestivals.com is the one that kind of coordinates all these and puts them all together. It's Rose 777's involved in it. Jason Lindgren's involved in it. Some other really good people. And I went to 3 of those events. The first time I had an absolute blast. It was a great venue in Greenville, South Carolina. It was really good. Second one I went to was at the same exact venue. That was awesome as well. The third one was in it was in some county. It was in a different place, a different venue. I didn't. By the time I went to the third one, I'd kind of met the same people all 3 times. And when I go to one of these conventions, I mean, these people are all different walks of life, all different. The whole gamut of society. There's a representative there from every walk of Americana that's there. And I would not feel bad if my wallet fell out of my pocket and I walked away. Somebody would pick it up and hand it to me. I have absolutely no doubt in my mind. I could put it on the table, walk away, go get a drink, come back, and it would still be there. I mean, that's the kind of integrity the people I met have, and that's pretty awesome. But I think I kind of moved past that, where I'm trying to. I don't really need to be around a lot of these people. I already know this to be truth,
right?
And so I don't need any more confirmation. I've already internalized it all. I'm benefiting from it every day. I could just sit out on my front porch, which I just took the time to pressure wash all day long. And I'm tired of being out in the sun. I'm all sunburnt. But I could just sit out there and just sit there and just look around and just look at a tree and just realize that is absolutely beautiful. That creates its own environment.
Yep. It
was made to be here. It creates an environment for the squirrels and the birds, and it drops the nuts and it makes new trees. And it's its own ecosystem. And that was not designed by some big explosion happening, creating everything out of nothing. I mean, that's so ludicrous for even the most novel individual to even think that that's how this all happened. I mean, that's like a cyclone or a hurricane or a tornado going through a junkyard and leaving behind it a brand new put together 747 jumbo jet.
Yep.
I mean, that's just as plausible as the Big Bang creating all of this wonderful infrastructure that works together. It's all interdependent. It's all here for us.
That's right. And of course, the flat Earth destroys all that silliness, which is another one of the reasons they like to keep it under wraps and portray flat earthers as these crazy nut jobs, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's exactly why the Flat Earth Society was created.
Correct. And Obama specifically, he didn't just say flat Earth. He said Flat Earth Society, knowing darn well people would go to that website and think, what a bunch of screw jobs.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, though. I mean, I did not like anything about Obama, but he was a good orator.
Oh, yeah.
I got to give it to that man. He knows how to get up there and captivate a crowd.
Oh, yeah. He would be a great 70s used car salesman. That's for sure. This thing only has 200,000 miles. You'll love it.
Yeah. It doesn't have any oil pressure, but, man, she hums like a sewing machine.
Yep. He was a wordsmith. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, somebody wordsmithed all that for him, but he was good at. He was a good presenter.
Sure.
So he'd had some schooling on that, I can tell.
That's for sure. What was I going to ask you? Oh, you had mentioned the Flat Earth festivals. I was a little surprised, just a little bit, to see that this year's is actually going to be in Las Vegas.
I haven't looked that far into it.
Flattoberfest October, I think. Yeah, October 21st and 22nd is in Las Vegas this year.
Is it at the Mandalay Bay?
I don't even think. I just see it's got a little YouTube video on it. It doesn't even say it's a 90-second clip.
George, that was a jest. You know what happened to Mandalay Bay, right?
Oh, geez, yeah. That's right.
I got you. I got the host.
Yeah, none of those cameras picked up a guy taking 400 weapons on an elevator.
That's another one, too. I mean, it just, every time you see something like this happen. Actually, you know, it's very interesting talking about conspiracy theory. It's not, you know, exactly flat Earth, but here in Virginia Beach, some of your listeners may know, but about 4 years ago, we had some, like, I'm doing your famous air quotes, a mass casualty event down at the Municipal Center in Virginia Beach. It was supposedly some disgruntled former Virginia Beach employee that came in and just started popping off rounds in one of the buildings. And, you know, they made this huge media event about it. Well, I did a little digging in this because it didn't, you know, and the funny thing is everybody, I'm talking most all cars you would see in Virginia Beach after that, they all had these little stickers in their back window that said VB Strong. Virginia Beach Strong, like right. Everybody's resisting whatever.
Yep.
But what they don't realize, this was a staged event. This was a media-driven event. No matter, I don't care what anybody says. What happened after that, that building where all the shooting supposedly took place, that was already scheduled to be on the demolition list prior to this event happening. But by that situation happening, all the red tape went away. And now they don't have to jump through all these wickets to tear down this big old building and erect a what? A brand new one where all the City Hall employees are now located. And
wow.
In fact, I'm going there April 11th for a hearing due to my tax situation I'm in right now.
Is that right?
I'm going to get to see the inside of it. I've been requesting a meeting with these guys for 3 years. And I finally get to go in there and give them a piece of my mind.
That's interesting. I vaguely remember the shooting, but I was not, I don't think I remember the fact that the municipal building, which was in the Princess Anne area, right? That I didn't know that they took it down and built a new one. I had no idea.
Oh, yeah, you should see this new one. It's nice. And I'll tell you what, they would have had to go through so much red tape because I guess, I think there was some asbestos in it, in the old one, and it was going to cost all this money to take it down. So, hey, why not just stage an event in there and push for more gun control and cut through all the red tape to demolish this building without all the permits? Hurry up, take it down immediately, right now, get rid of it. Kind of like they did with World Trade Towers and Sandy Hook and now this. And it happens all over. The same exact thing happens all over the place.
That's so interesting that you mentioned that, because that's the same story with Lucky Larry Silverstein. What it was going to cost to take the asbestos and do all the repairs on those two towers were, some quotes were, $500 million to $1 billion. And of course, he ended up making $4, $5, $6 billion off the insurance. It is so unusual that these stories continue to repeat themselves. It's unbelievable.
Have you ever seen that interview with Lucky Larry when somebody had asked him about the insurance and why he was not in the World Trade Center?
Oh, yeah.
Hit?
I had a skin appointment, and I didn't want to upset my wife by canceling it.
You just can't make this stuff up. And
No.
And he just says that, and people are supposed to believe it? How far have we fallen, really?
Yeah, there are literally hundreds, with Marvin Bush, George Bush's brother, running Securicom, which ran security for Newark Airport and Logan Airport in Boston, which is where the planes took off. There's just the Otago message system letting all the Israelis who work there know don't go to work today. It's just hundreds and hundreds of, that is one of the most obvious. I don't even know how you categorize it as a false flag or, because we blamed somebody else who had nothing to do with it. So I guess it's a false flag / inside job. But these things, like Oklahoma City, like the Challenger, like we talked about back in '86, like 9/11, they create such an emotion within people where they won't even question it, because the emotion, like all these things are meant to draw a certain emotion from people. If you remember Pearl Harbor, FDR ran in 1940 on, we're not going to send your boys off to war. So it took this event, this huge event to be splashed on all the newspapers the next day for Americans to see their fellow brothers and sisters, burn up on these boats. And there were lines around the block at the recruiting station. The same thing, September 12th, 2001. There were lines at the recruiting station. You look at the football player, Pat Tillman. He turned down a $3 million or $5 million contract extension with the Cardinals to join the Army. And he was murdered as a specialist E4, making probably $2,000 a month.
Yeah, you put two events together that are very interestingly related. I don't know if you remember or if you've ever seen or your listeners have seen the, I forget who, Project for the New American Century.
Yep, PNAC, yep.
They put out this memo that I'm paraphrasing. I can't remember exactly what it says, and I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but it said, we're not going to be able to accomplish these goals absent a Pearl Harbor-like event.
Yep.
And look what they put in. Look what they put into place. They put in the Patriot Act, and that was already written before 9/11.
That is 1,000% correct.
And so they got exactly what they wanted while we were all looking towards where? Iraq? What the heck did Iraq have to do with anything? Or Afghanistan? They didn't have nothing to do with any of this.
Nope. Even if you believe the official story, 16 of the 19 were Saudis.
Yeah, exactly. And look, we're still buddies with them.
Oh, yeah.
They cut women's heads off in their square down there for, the most ludicrous things. Have you ever been to Saudi Arabia?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
What was your impression of that place?
Well, to be fair, I wasn't off base too much. I was there during Desert Storm. We never lost Saudi. I was at my dad was at KKMC by the Kuwaiti border. I spent most of my time in Dahran. We were actually just a couple blocks down the road from where those Pennsylvania reservists got killed. What was that? February 25th, 91, when that one Scud missile got through and hit those the 14th quartermaster. But I didn't really interact with them that much. I had obviously much more interaction with the Iraqis. The few times, I had a chance to go off base and do things, very brief interactions. They're very, well-to-do, lots of money. The cars they drove, everybody drove BMWs and Audis, these fancy cars, and every block had at least 4 or 5 jewelers. So it was that's what I remember most from being very hot. Of course, hearing the mosques play their prayers 3 times a day was a little different, being, 21 years old at the time and going to that. But I didn't really interact with them that much to do any judgment with the Saudis, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah, I was never actually. I did land in Saudi Arabia in a C-5 Galaxy. Mm-hmm. This was before all the war kicked out. This was during Ernest Will back in the late 80s.
Gotcha.
And we brought some riverboats out there, and we landed under the cover of darkness. We weren't allowed to wear uniforms. We had to be in civilian clothes. And we were all armed in civilian clothes with no passports. We weren't allowed to carry our diplomatic passport, nothing. And so we're out there, we load these boats up, and we head out. And we ended up doing a little stint in Bahrain, and that's where I had my most interaction with the Saudis. They would come across the causeway and come over into like the jewel of the Middle East, which was Bahrain. And I'll tell you, those people would just let their hair down, those Saudis, and they'd just drink and carry on and womanize and do everything they're not allowed to do in their home country. And then they'd go back to Saudi Arabia acting like the purest of the pure.
Yep. That's funny you mentioned that, because they sent us there for a 24-hour break. I remember going across this bridge. It must have been at least a couple miles long to get to Bahrain, a very long bridge. And then we were in this bar that played like hockey fights. Like that was their whole thing on the TV. It was hockey fights, and we stayed there for a few hours for R&R.
Was it ASU Bahrain? Was it a military base?
It could have been. I don't recall. I just remember it. Yeah, it had to be a military base for sure. I just remember the black and white checkered floors. It was a smaller place, but it was very upscale. We could eat anything we wanted to, and plenty to drink.
About all there was to do there.
Yeah. That we were there for just that night. We came back. The most I remember about Bahrain was that bridge, how hot it was, and how just being able to cross a bridge. Like you said, everybody's over there drinking, and they'd come back over and continue on. It's kind of like, I guess it was their version of Las Vegas, right?
Yeah. It's like what happens in Bahrain stays in Bahrain.
Exactly. That's very, very interesting. So I would like to talk, because we'd mentioned before, I do want you to talk and present a little bit about the legal aspect of things you were talking about. Is there anything that we hadn't touched on, the flat Earth, that you'd like to bring up?
Well, something you've mentioned in a couple different podcasts. You talked about the Go Fast rocket launch from 2004. Which it's kind of weird. It's what, 19 years?
That's crazy to think it's been that long.
And it was in Nevada. And something I didn't realize till I watched one of your podcasts, and I looked this up. Well, obviously it went 72 miles high. A lot of people, including myself, have seen that onboard recorded video from that rocket. Went 72 miles high, and it just went, eek. It just kind of hit something, and it stopped rotating like 1,000 RPMs or however fast that thing was rotating. It stopped rotating. It stopped traveling up. It didn't destroy itself, so it hit something that stopped all of those revolutions and stopped its upward trajectory. And that telemetry was actually verified by the Federal Aviation Administration. Did you know that?
That I did not know. Breaking news.
Yeah, it was actually, the telemetry was validated by the FAA. It did go 72 miles high. Is the firmament 72 miles high in Nevada? That's only, 380,000 feet?
Yeah.
So, I heard you also mention the Encyclopedia
Britannica from 58, yeah.
58, where at so many degrees south latitude, it was
13,000 feet or something like that?
Yeah, so obviously that's a dome. Because if it's only 13,000 feet at whatever latitude south, obviously a lot further than Nevada.
Right.
And then in Nevada, it's 380,000 feet high. Well, that kind of tells you it's kind of a dome shape.
Yep. And I talk often about the mockery of the people who run things. It's not a coincidence that I think it was maybe it was 65, but the Houston Astrodome was right there in Houston, down the road from NASA.
Oh, I never even put those two together.
Yeah.
Another thing we talk about, I think I kind of opened with, these unimaginable different rotations and trajectories that we're supposed to be on if the heliocentric model is correct, which is unimaginable. But here's another one. This just happened 6 months ago. On 13 September, a year and a half ago, 13 September 2022, a group of 6 people, a group known as Nomad Riflemen, recorded a rifle shot in the desert of Wyoming of 4.4 miles. World record. Now, let me just suggest to some of the people involved or listening that if you're involved in a shot like this, can you imagine the math that you would have to do to account for all of these different rotations, traveling trajectories, linear motion through space, and all of these things, and know which direction you're shooting at what exact precise time of the day that these spirals... Oh, and the moon is rotating around us too, by the way.
That's right.
I just throw a little something else in there that I never mentioned earlier. And how are you going to hit something almost 4.5 miles away and do all of that math and calculate for all of that supposed Coriolis? It's impossible. Yeah,
that guy actually fired a .416 Barrett cartridge. That was a big round.
A .416.
Yeah, it was a custom-built rifle, chambered a .416 Barrett cartridge.
What does the .416 signify?
I don't know, but I'm sure if I looked, I could find.
Huh.
.416 Barrett cartridge.
Wow.
That's a big round.
Evidently had a little punch to it.
Yeah, it did. 4.4 miles. That's incredible. That's actually the first I've heard of that. I'm just looking on the computer right now.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Something else you kind of mentioned on one of a bunch of your other podcasts is talked about helium gas.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And how important it is for the Satelloon projects that they have going on. Well, did you know, or did your listeners know, that in United States Code Title 50, under War and National Defense, Chapter 10, there is a whole chapter devoted to the production, the control, the transportation, and the use of helium gas?
No, I had no ideas.
Yes, sir. It's Title 50, United States Code, Chapter 10, helium gas. Now, why would the federal government be so worried about something that you make party balloons out of?
This is interesting. It actually is on Cornell's, which that college has come across so many of my rabbit holes, that Ithaca area. Very interesting. I'll have to read into it. I haven't. The U.S. helium law is a United States statute drafted for the purpose of Conservation, Exploration, and Procurement of Helium Gas. The act of Congress authorized the condemnation, lease, or purchase of acquired lands bearing the potential of producing helium gas. So basically, if I'm reading this correctly, basically the federal government has a monopoly on helium.
Well, that is important enough to put a whole chapter in there.
Wow. That is very interesting. And this, from 1925, this was originally done in 1925?
I did not go back and look that far.
It was introduced to the House May 2nd, 1924, and it was signed into law. You want to hear this? This was signed into law March 3rd, 1925. There's your 3-3. You can't make this stuff up. Well, here's my question. If Greta in the World Economic Forum tells us that CO2, carbon dioxide, is the most important gas on Earth, why is that not also regulated? But it's not anywhere in there. But this doggone pesky little helium gas that you fill up children's party balloons with has a whole chapter devoted to it in the United States law. That is so interesting. I knew things like, NASA and the United States government were number 1 and 2 as far as, users of helium. And I remember there being a shortage a couple years ago. I remember going to party stores and then being, oh, sorry, we're all out. I'm like, how do you out of helium?
Because they had to launch some satellites. They didn't have enough left over for the party balloons.
That's right, the Satelloons. And I still believe to this day that the whole Chinese blue thing was somebody's Satelloon fell out of the stratosphere, and they had to make up a story to cover the actual truth about satellites. That's just my theory on it.
Well, I'll tell you what, George, that makes a heck of a lot more sense than what the news told us, right?
Why in God's green earth would the United States allow a Chinese spy satellite to fly across the country and wait for it, to shoot it over the ocean when anybody who's flown on a plane knows that there's lots of land out there you could have shot it over and not harmed a person.
Well, that's not the issue. They didn't want anybody to find it.
Oh, well, there you go. That's a good point as well.
Yeah, because if it's over the water, only certain assets can recover it. But if it's
right.
over land, any Joe Farmer out there tending to his sheep, it might just land in his backyard, and he might just have an iPhone or a cell phone, and he can capture some video, like they did with I think, where was it, in Brazil or one of those Latin American countries where the satellite that was launched with a bunch of fanfare and had some corporate logos on it. I wish I could remember the name, but it was so funny because that actually fell on land where some people recorded it, and it had the same exact logos on it. It was on a balloon.
Seriously?
Yeah, I wish I probably shouldn't have said anything because I can't give any names. I think Samsung and Nike. I think there were some other corporate logos on there, and it was launched with some fanfare, and it went up on a rocket, but somehow it landed on a balloon that somehow lost its air or helium and fell and was actually, they had video, and it actually had little, it had crashed, but it still had like little lights blinking on it. It was, whatever it was designed to do, it was still trying to do whatever.
That's interesting. A satellite crashes in Brazil attached to a balloon.
Yeah, imagine that, right?
Sure enough. Man, that's so interesting. I vaguely remember that happening. Was it 2014 or something?
I wish I could give you. It just came to mind as we were talking about helium, and that was one of the images or series of images that popped into my head, and I can't quote you exactly when it was or unfortunately where it even fell, so people can go look it up, but it did actually happen.
That's interesting.
I'm not just not in the game of making up my own facts.
No, yeah, I'm seeing the stories on it, but there's different dates. It looks like 2017 seems to be. It's definitely within the last 10 years. You can certainly find it, and I'm on Google, so I'm not even on Yandex or one of these alternate search engines. So there's definitely a lot of information about that. Yeah, there are so many. We are deceived. That's the thing I talk about. It's really hard to discern the truth when it seems like almost everything is a lie.
Yeah. Here's another good one, George. Let me. You talked about this before, and I kind of just wanted to put a little spin on it. When the Blue Origin took off.
Oh yeah, the flying phallus.
The flying phallus. Yes. Well, there is actually still a very, very good YouTube video up. And it is put on by PBS NewsHour channel on YouTube. And that's when, of course, William Shatner launched into space. And it's actually 2 hours and 30 minutes long, and most of that is an advertisement. But it does show some good shots of the Blue Origin. And have you ever looked at that thing and looked at all of the huge windows in that craft?
Yes, particularly in the area where they're sitting, right?
Exactly where they're sitting. So they just they can just look out and see things.
Uh-huh.
And when you get up to that low of air pressure and you got 14.7 pounds of pressure or thereabout per square inch, pushing on that Lexan or whatever it is, I'm telling you, there is no way that would ever hold up.
Yeah, it would have collapsed, huh?
Yeah, and they had a door that opened outward. Who would ever do that on a pressurized vehicle?
Really? I need to go back and watch that, because those are things that I didn't connect the dots when I was watching that.
Yeah, it opens from the inside out.
That doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
And there's a...
Go ahead.
There's on the door that is also an actual big window that opens from the inside out, which you would never do on a pressurized capsule. There's a huge louver. I'm not kidding you. It's like a dryer vent right on the door itself. Now, I don't know if it goes all the way through to the inner part of the capsule, but you look at it, it looks like a louver like you would have in your soffit vent or a dryer vent on the side of your house. That's what it looks like.
Wow.
And then... you just open the door and just walk right out. It's like a full-size screen door type door. I mean, it's ridiculous.
I thought one of the most ridiculous things was, here are these human beings on a rocket, and there wasn't any emergency services anywhere near that launch.
Yeah, well, actually, here's another interesting thing I kind of looked into is I'm looking at this video I'm referencing that's 2 hours and 30 minutes long by PBS NewsHour channel on YouTube was actually just the setup and the launch. But the interesting part on that video, besides all of their self-grandizing of everything and making this completely unrealistic, they drove to the launch site in brand new Rivian electric pickup trucks.
Really?
You know what the motto for Rivian is?
No, I don't.
Check this out. Vehicles made for the planet. Rivian has a contract to build 100,000 electric delivery vans for Amazon. Jeff Bezos.
Sure enough.
Well, who owns the Blue Origin?
Jeff Bezos.
Yeah. So Rivian's involved. Amazon owns 20% of Rivian. This was all a huge advertisement. It's all it was. And you throw an actor in there, William Shatner, who looked absolutely miserable.
Yep.
like there's no way he could have even withstood a half a G.
No way. Yeah, because he was, 90, 91 at the time?
I don't know, but he looked like a walking heart attack. And there's no way, if he actually did what they said he did, he would have never made it.
No.
But he comes out, he's talking, he's trying to give speeches, and they interrupt him and won't listen to him and go show the pretty girls, It's just so funny. But anyway, okay, so.
And by the way, let me inject one more thing real quick. If we were not on the world stage, how would somebody like Rich from Virginia Beach or George from Delaware, if we had the money and the technology to build a rocket, do you think they would ever let us launch here in the United States?
Well, they let Jeff Bezos.
But I'm saying I think he's one of the characters on the world stage. I think he's very much he's like Bill Gates. He's like these guys, Anderson Cooper. I think these guys are all controlled, who play a character on the world stage. I don't think their stories are organic whatsoever. I think they're part of the club.
Yeah, that's a valid question, and absolutely not. We're not allowed to find things out. Only the puppets are allowed to find things out.
There you go. Agreed. So there you go. Did you want to kind of switch gears and talk about the legal side of things that you wanted to mention?
Sure. Yeah. Believe it or not, this goes hand in hand with the knowledge that we have been lied to, and we don't live on a place where they tell us we live. This is like an extension of that. It's not different. It's not a separate category. It is directly related to knowing that we were created, we're here, this is our existence, we live in the center of it, and we're not going to be, harmed by an asteroid that, killed the dinosaurs 26 million years ago. That's right. Not how this is. And I will, George, I'll probably give the framers a little bit more credit than other people do, but there are ways to enforce your rights, and we do have them, and government didn't give them to us.
That's right.
The government recognized these as the Creator gave them to us, and it's in the Declaration of Independence, it's in the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights, and my personal belief is it's not window dressing, because all of these people wearing black robes out there, they took an oath to that same document. And if you can hold their feet to the fire and they violate their oath, you can have them removed, and it's not that difficult. And all of these shysters out there, I call attorneys shysters, because they're all part of the Bar Association. Most judges are part of it. Most politicians are part of it. I mean, the Bar Association is trying to kill this country. That's why the only way you can mount a proper defense in any court of law, whether they drag you into an administrative procedure or anything, you have to know where you are, and do never hire an attorney to defend yourself. You just need to learn how the system works. It's not hard. I did it. I've got 0 days of law experience. I've been to no law schools, none of that. I just do a lot of reading. I do a lot of listening and verifying, mainly a lot of reading. And when somebody encroaches upon any of your rights, your right to own property, your right to be autonomous, your right to free speech, any of your right to travel, your right to property, any of that, if anybody encroaches on that, take them to task and hold them accountable. It can be done. It's not that difficult. People have just been trained. What do people tell you, George, when say you get a ticket or you get charged with a crime? What's the first thing us Americans are expected to do?
You better get a lawyer.
You better get a lawyer. Well, let me tell you what. Those lawyers first, they're loyal first to the court. Second, they are loyal to the system and not to their client. They're loyal to the bar first. They're loyal to the court second. And if you hire one and you're their client, they're loyal to you third.
Yep.
So if you want to pay good money for one of these people and you're the third tier on the list, it's not going to work out well for you. So it's pretty easy to learn this stuff. It's not hard. It's on Telegram. Some of the channels I mentioned will get you a firm footing. And the taxation is theft. And people talk about, being a tax evader. Well, there is a way you can become a tax evader. That's when you sign your name under penalties of perjury on a 1040 or another tax form, and you did it wrong.
Right.
Well, you just signed your name under penalty of perjury. So you did this to yourself if you made a mistake. So really, there's really not a lot to learn about this. It's actually very easy. The one thing I really like to press upon people is you have to remember the tier of authority. Because one can only create that which it creates. So in other words, the Creator made us. We are responsible to the Creator. Well, man created government. Government is responsible to man. Man is not responsible to the government. And that's where everything got twisted. Everybody thinks the government can do anything it wants. Oh, it can indict a ham sandwich. It can do all this. Well, no, people got it wrong. The government works for the people. And they are our servants and our trustees. So that has to be keep in firm perspective. We don't work for them. They don't dictate what we do. We dictate what they do by our Constitution. Our Constitution tells them what they can and must do and what they cannot do and prohibited from doing. And it's our job to hold them to it.
Why do you think, Rich, that they have been able to get, when I say they, of course, I mean, the controllers at the top of the pyramid, how have they been able to get away with so much, with such little resistance from us? And by the way, I mean, this is nothing new. This isn't like it's just happened in the last 3 years. That this has happened for at least 160 years or so. That it doesn't matter who's controlling it, whether it's the left. Look at all the things that Clinton Obama did. The right, look at the war crimes that H.W. Bush and W. Bush committed, and sending troops off to battle under false pretenses. I always say. The left wing and the right wing belong to the same corrupt bird. And I think the two-party system is more of a diversion than it is, a fair system that the government put in place to make sure that they are held accountable, right?
Right. Well, we kind of touched on this before. I'll go back to the old pyramid analogy. The three dots starts connecting things together. Or one or two may or may not, but three definitely starting to get somewhere. And look when they took over our education system.
Yeah.
I mean, that right there, and that's, Rockefeller was involved in that. Standard Oil.
That's right.
He was involved in the pharmaceutical industry. I mean, you can connect so many dots there. But I was informed, and I have no reason to disbelieve this, but back in the 1920s and the 19-teens, you could walk around and you could ask virtually any American. I think this came from a journalist, actually. A journalist out of a journalist that wrote for a paper, I believe it was in Kansas. I might have the wrong state, but he made a statement in his paper, and I wish I could recall the name of the paper he had, but it's no longer around. But he'd made a statement that in 1925, he could go around and he could ask almost any common, everyday American walking around on the streets a question about the Constitution, and almost all of them could answer it without any problems. And then it was like 10 or 15 years later, he did the same exact thing, the same exact place. I think he was in New York City. And he said it was astounding what had happened in 10 or 15 years, that practically nobody he asked these questions knew the answer. And this was way back when. Now look at us. Yeah. We think the Constitution gave us rights.
You're exactly right. We believe that the Constitution gave us rights. We believe that we're just an anomaly here, that we're here just on the chance that there was a big explosion and we were able to, outlive the dinosaurs, and we evolved from a fish that kept, flopping up onto the beach, and we finally, adapted to our environment. But for some reason, we just stopped at mankind. We just stopped evolving right here, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I don't know. I mean, here's another good example. Look at the farce that was just played on us in 2020.
Yeah.
I mean, it was absolutely brilliant. And like you'd mentioned earlier, Event 201, they laid out the exact same scenario. And people didn't catch on to this. It's amazing. I mean, it's really amazing that, we have devolved. I really do think we are devolving, because you touched on some of this in some of your other episodes about some of the brilliant architecture that we had back in the 17th, 18th century, and look at it now. We all live in boxes.
Yep. My wife calls us, she calls them cookie cutter neighborhoods. Everything looks the same.
Yeah, I kind of live in a neighborhood similar to that myself. Look at go just drive through any small town in the country and look at some of these older houses that were built. I mean, look at the elaborate, little handworking that they've done just like on the roofs and around the windows, we don't make stuff like that anymore.
No.
And back in the day, they were saying we had free energy and all that too. And, that all got heisted. And now we're paying for electricity. We're paying for our water. We're paying for, garbage pickup. We're paying for sewage disposal. We're being taxed on our income. We're being taxed on every dollar we spend on sales tax. We're being taxed for owning property. How the hell are we supposed to survive? That's not how the framers intended this to work.
Nope.
And it's not written that way. So all we got to do, pull the Constitution out, dust it off, knock the dust off and the cobwebs, and read it. It's in plain language. It's not hard to understand. In fact, Cornell Law University has a good Constitution annotated, which can explain in layman's terms what some of those phrases and words and things and what the actual meaning of it was, because it was written back in the 1700s and revised, in the 1800s, but they kind of spoke a little different language then. So you need to understand what the intent was and not make up your own interpretation of what it meant.
That's right. And I kind of mentioned the same thing along with the Bible. Sometimes we want to interpret it in a way that fits our lifestyle and not what it's really saying.
Exactly. And sometimes I've read the Bible too. I haven't read the whole thing. It's a very interesting document. I know that it has been, like, for instance, the one I was reading was the King James Version. Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know how much I trust King James. We kicked one of his son or grandson, whoever, King George III, out of here because we didn't like what he was doing.
Yeah.
Well, who's to trust King James for? I like to verify things, and if I can't verify things, I simply can't verify them. So I'm not picking and choosing. It's
sure.
Like some of it's speculative. I mean, how did they leave out the Book of Enoch, and why?
That's a question I have, and I just recently purchased it and have been reading it. It's really incredible. It's like almost like a side version of Genesis, and really, when you read it, that really lends a lot more credence to what we believe in today, as far as the firmament, the wandering stars, and that the earth is stationary and it doesn't move, and it's on the four pillars.
Yeah, and I don't want people to misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not saying don't believe in what you don't want to believe in. And there's, a lot of people get a lot of inspiration out of the Holy Scripture, and I get that. I totally do get that, and I appreciate the fact that we have that still here. But, like if you ever read some of the writings, like have you ever heard of the Mahabharata?
Vaguely.
I'll tell you what, that is a very interesting document. I've read about half of it, and it was a while ago now, to be honest with you. And if anybody wants to look it up, Mahabharata, Maha. I can't even spell it now, but Mahabharata. I think it come out of originally India, or as an Indian writer, and it's absolutely phenomenal. You talk about, and I don't know whether to believe that or not either. I can't verify any of it. So I just know that there is a creator, and we were created by him, and this place was created by him for us and for us to take care of it.
Correct.
Take care of each other.
Yep.
Don't abuse the place. Don't mess it all up for others, because everybody else has a right to it as well. And corporations do not have a right to destroy it.
And corporations don't have the right to own it either.
No, they don't. Corporations were instituted by usually state government, because they have to be in a certain state.
Right.
And that corporation is an object of that state. So, again, the people created the state. So the state is answerable to the people, while the corporation is answerable to the state. So really, corporations are the third tier down compared to people.
That's right.
And I want everybody to keep that in perspective, that you cannot control what you do not create. And if you just remember that one simple line, it applies to everything.
And it's amazing to me how corporations and banks and certain entities like Big Pharma, how we the people are held accountable for everything. But banks are bailed out by the billions. We've seen auto manufacturers bailed out by the billions. But when mom and pop's business are in trouble, or when they were told to close down, I've said many times, I have friends. I lived in Colorado for quite some time. Upwards of 40% of small businesses collapsed between 2020 and 2023. Most of them didn't get bailouts, or they got PPPs, and it was just a very difficult situation. But if you're at the top of the food chain, how many times have we seen banks? Look at Silicon Valley Bank, how just weeks before they collapsed, these people were getting millions of dollars in bonuses, and then they just walk away.
Well, I mean, you talk about top of the food chain. We are at the top of the food chain. We just don't realize that.
Exactly. Right.
And we don't behave like that.
Right.
And we don't walk around like that. We have forgotten that. It has been trained out of us over the generations.
Yep.
I mean, don't get me wrong. It didn't just happen yesterday. This has been a planned thing to get us to believe that we are not the center of creation, but we are. And that's why I say Flat Earth ties right into this, because the people run the states. The states don't run the people. We have a right to own things, and they can't interfere and meddle with that, even in the form of taxation. The only thing the states can tax is corporations, because they created them. They can boss them around and tax them right out of existence if they want. They created them. Well, they didn't create us, and they didn't create our labor. So it's very important for people. I would like people to, if they take nothing away from this, it is just that one thing. You can only control what you create.
And that's a great point. And I think some of the questions that are thrown out to these people, high, quote unquote, high in the government, like your Pelosi's, et cetera, like, sir, you work for the no, we don't. That's been said on television. I think all this is intentionally done to make people think that we are supposed to bend the knee to them, when obviously we are in a real system. We are to elect someone, and they are supposed to represent us and have limited powers, which between executive, legislative, and judicial are supposed to counteract each other to make sure it's an honest process. And of course, back in the day, even my grandfather used to tell me that the media was the fourth unofficial branch. They used to break stories all the time up until I would say the mid 80s was about when I really started to see the media start to get slanted. There was still stories, Iran-Contra, the church, the church group, was that back in the 70s? The church, I forget what it was called. The church hearings where they brought about the heart attack guns and the truth about some things. But since then, 95% of the media is just for the government. They just basically parrot what the government wants them to say.
Well, you say government like they're acting as a legitimate government.
It's not.
When in fact, they're not.
Right.
And here's what's going on. And a lot of people don't realize this, but when you see your Chuck Schumers and your Nancy Pelosi and all these other senators and U.S. congressmen get up there and they flap their gums on the front of the TV, first of all, if you're watching that, you're wasting your time. But if you are watching that, keep this in mind. Every law that they pass, do you or your listeners, George, know what is affected or who is under the jurisdiction of the laws that they pass in the United States Congress and the president signs?
Are you talking about the taxpayers per se?
No, I'm talking about who or what is affected by what the U.S. Congress passes and what the president signs into law. Where is that and to whom is affected by that directly?
Who is that?
It is the people that occupy the 10 square miles that is D.C., the Northern Marianas, Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, all of our insular possessions, and our dockyards, our forts, and our magazines. It is not effective in the states. The states are completely sovereign from the federal government.
Because you're referring to the 10th Amendment?
Well, actually, no. I'm talking about, it is actually in article, if I can find it here. I'll be able to quote it in a minute. But I don't have my glasses on. I'm just kind of sitting here, kind of
no worries,
freeboarding this stuff. But it is written that, and it's in the Constitution. It's in the federal Constitution. And the federal Constitution is actually on equal footing with each state constitution. I don't know if a lot of people understand or realize that either.
Yeah.
And it will be in every one of the 50 states' constitution that the U.S. Constitution and that state constitution is the law. But what I'm getting at is these mouthpieces up in Congress, the federal Congress, they only pass laws for D.C. and our possessions. They don't pass laws for the states. The states have to individually adopt those and either adopt them in whole or adopt them in part. But they do not become immediately effective upon the people or the states. In fact, they don't become effective on the people at all.
That's interesting. What about things from a financial aspect, like when I guess Trump was still president when they did the, everybody got their little checks.
Yeah, I gave mine back.
Yeah, I know. Myself and a lot of people did.
Yeah, I went and told my bank, I'm like, look, you've got absolutely no authority to be manipulating my bank account whatsoever without my permission. I said, send it back. And they did. So I didn't accept it. I don't want any strings that come attached by it.
Right, because there's always strings. Nothing is for free with these guys.
Yeah, when you accept a benefit, you're going to be expected to perform for that benefit. It don't come for free. Something's coming up behind it somewhere.
Right, and that's something that as I got older, I learned about voting. If you vote, you're, and this is just me. I'm not telling what other people what to think or do, but if you vote, you're condoning the system that you're a part of. That's just me.
Yeah, you're electing your own slave master.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what they think they are. They're actually not.
Right.
But they all do believe that, whatever they say goes, and that simply is not the case. And it's proven. It's in the Constitution if people will only read it. And I'm telling you, and your listeners, not you, sorry, but your listeners, that the Constitution is a mandatory and a prohibitive document. It spells out, it enumerates the limited powers, and it also enumerates the duties of all public servants. And if they break their duty, it's our job to hold their ass accountable for it. And not enough of us are doing it. And if we all did, or at least 5% of us did, we would transform from a democracy that they tell us this is back to the constitutional republic that it's supposed to be. Just like 3% of the colonists picked up arms against the British in the Revolutionary War, we pushed them back to England.
Yep.
It doesn't take a gigantic mass. These people will start figuring out when you hit them in the pocketbook, because everything runs by insurance companies. And a lot of people think that, when they get a large payout because they sued a government agency, that it's coming out of the taxpayer coffer. No, it's coming from an insurance company. And that insurance company pulls the strings on everything.
That's right.
Because
they put the money in the politicians' pockets.
No public official can be a public official unless he has indemnity insurance.
That's right. That is 100% right.
Now, if any of your listeners out there have ever gotten a traffic ticket or a fender bender, that goes against their license if they have one. And then it also is notified to their insurance company. And guess what happens? Your premiums go up.
Yep.
So you ding the insurance company a few times. They're not going to like it. They're going to jack your rates up. Well, guess what happens when a couple people start suing their local, township, their county, their city, their state? Well, It's kind of hard to sue the state, but
they can pull their indemnity insurance, and that guy will not be allowed to serve anymore.
Well, when I'm done going against the city may no longer be incorporated because they're going to lose their insurance.
Yeah, that would be a great day. Maybe they'll name Virginia Beach Rich Beach when you're done with them.
I don't want that. I just want 2 or 3 more people to do the exact same thing.
There you go.
It's possible. A little knowledge, you can go a long way. Well, knowing who and what you are goes a long way. Knowledge helps.
Yep. But
you gotta walk the walk, or they're going to knock your crutches out. You're going to fall flat on your face.
That's right. We're coming up on our 2-hour mark. I wanted to. That's a good segue. I kind of wanted to give you the floor for any final comments on Flat Earth or anything you were just talking about on the legal side of things. If you want to give us a Rudy speech or anything you would like to do, the floor is certainly yours. And I do want to thank you. You've been a tremendous guest, and I greatly appreciate you.
Well, George, I appreciate your podcast. I'm probably one of your newest, biggest fans. I'm going to continue to listen, and I appreciate you having me on. I didn't think you would, but you must have been pretty desperate because here I am on your 33rd podcast, by the way.
Confirmed Illuminati.
Which I am not a Mason, by the way. My parents were my dad was big into the Masons. My grandfather was big into the Masons back in Ohio, where I'm originally from. And funny story, my dad tried to get me to go into the Demolay, which is like baby Masons.
Yep.
And I just told him, no, Dad, I'm not interested in it at all. He was, disappointed, but I did not. Something just wasn't right about that whole thing. And I rejected it, and now I found out a lot more about it, and just glad I didn't. At least I think I'm glad I didn't. I don't know. I might be better off had I done it, but it's just a decision I made as a young kid, going on my instincts, and my instincts had led me to a pretty comfortable life right now, and I think we should all, trust our informed decisions and think about things for yourself and keep an open mind. Don't be I try not to allow myself to be influenced by others. I try to make my own decisions about everything.
Yep.
And I don't leave it in anybody else's hands. I was given a brain. I was a test engineer for many years, so I can put two and two together sometimes. And everybody else can too. Everybody's capable.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. And I tell people all the time, I try to give information, try to give accurate information, but troubleshoot me. I'm not perfect, and much of these are my beliefs, and do with it what you will. Don't take anything I say, I'm trying to word it correctly. I'm just saying, like you said, just discern for yourself. Bill Cooper always said, listen to everyone, like everyone. Even when I did my Bill Cooper episode, or not Bill Cooper, my Alex Jones episode on my other podcast a few weeks ago, I never told anybody not to listen to Alex Jones, because even controlled opposition will tell you what's coming. So it's good to listen to all avenues and then discern for yourself what is truth and what is not. So you've given us a lot of tremendous information. I appreciate your input on Flat Earth, all the other information that you gave us about helium, the cosmic microwave background, and the things that went along with Jeff Bezos' launch, and the shooting that took place down your way 4 years ago. That's something I didn't know about, that they condemned the building and brought up a new one, which, again, there's some financial gains by some certain people, so that shouldn't come as a surprise. So it seems like when these things happen, there's always some type of gain by those who reap the rewards, whether it's insurance money, new buildings, contracts, or getting laws passed, like what happened March 22nd, 2021, I think, in Colorado Springs, or I'm sorry, Denver, when that gun bill was dead on arrival, and the King Soup shooting happened, and the next day, miraculously, that law went through with no problem.
Yeah, well, you got to remember who that law applies to also, because the state can only control what it creates. It doesn't control the people. We're part of the militia. I mean, a lot of people don't want to understand that, but read the Second Amendment carefully and understand it. Not only the federal Second Amendment, but in your state's Bill of Rights, which should be Article 1 in your state's Constitution, and look it up where it says, the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. Well, it's for the militia. It's not for the military. It's not for the police officers. It's for the people.
That's right.
Only people have rights. Everybody else has duties and responsibilities. So I really don't pay a lot of attention to the legislation that's passed, because it doesn't affect me.
Yeah, they're certainly doing their best to strip people of, if they had their way, the only thing people would have would be a slingshot and some rocks. Because even the states, I think Colorado, when I was living there, they got rid of 30-round mags. I think 10's the most you can get there now. Yeah,
well, the old thing is, come take mine.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Well, Rich, it's been a pleasure. I'm going to ask you to stand by. I want to talk to you off to the side for just a second. Any last words that you missed that you didn't have a chance to say?
No, George, I tell you what, I think we covered just about everything, brother. And thank you again for having me on your podcast. I absolutely love it. And I'm looking forward to the next one. Listening to the next one.
Absolutely. You've been a great guest. And again, thank you so much for your time. On behalf of Rich, this is George. Thank you for listening to the Flat Earth Files, and episode 34 will be coming your way in a few days. God bless you all. Take care and keep your head on a swivel. And until next time, my friends, we will see you.